22 minutes into nearly every match at this World Cup, the referee blows a whistle that has nothing to do with a foul, a goal, or an injury. Players jog to the sideline, coaches huddle, and on screens inside the stadium and on televisions around the world, the broadcast cuts away. FIFA calls it a hydration break. Broadcasters call it something else entirely. They call it inventory. Because right now, as the 2026 World Cup barrels into its knockout rounds, FIFA is sitting on a projected €12 billion payday, the biggest in the history of the sport, and a lot of fans are starting to ask where exactly that money is coming from and who's paying for it. So what's really happening here? Let's start with the headline number, because it's almost hard to believe. FIFA's own projections, along with independent analysts tracking the tournament's finances, now put total revenue from this World Cup cycle somewhere between $11 and $13 billion, with the 2026 tournament itself responsible for roughly $9 billion of that on its own. To put that in perspective, the 2022 World Cup in Qatar generated around $7 billion across its full cycle. This year's edition is on pace to almost double it. There are obvious reasons for the jump, but before we deep dive into that, subscribe to the channel for future updates. 48 teams instead of 32, 104 matches instead of 64, 3 host countries instead of 1, spreading the tournament across 16 cities in the United States, Mexico, and Canada. More games simply means more broadcast windows, more sponsorship slots, and more tickets to sell. But the bigger story isn't the scale, it's how FIFA chose to monetize that scale, and that's where the backlash started. Here's where things get interesting. For the first time in World Cup history, FIFA introduced dynamic pricing on tickets, the same demand-based algorithm you'd see used for an NBA game or a concert, where prices shift in real time based on how fast tickets are selling. It had never been used for a World Cup before, and the early numbers shocked a lot of fans. The most expensive category of ticket for the final in New Jersey was originally listed around $6,700. By this spring, that same category had climbed past $10,000. On the resale market, some final tickets were listed above $2 million. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown, because we're covering every angle of this tournament's money story as it develops, and there's a lot more to get into. The backlash didn't stay quiet for long. Attorneys general in New York and New Jersey opened a joint investigation into FIFA's ticketing practices, citing complaints about inflated costs, fans being misled about where their seats actually were, and a staggered release system that critics argued was designed to manufacture artificial demand before prices climbed. FIFA pushed back, framing the pricing model as simply adapting to how tickets are sold across the North American entertainment industry. But the optics were rough, especially when even high-profile figures publicly balked at paying roughly $1,000 for upper-level seats to the U.S. opener. Under pressure, FIFA made some concessions. It introduced what it called a supporter entry tier, guaranteeing a batch of $60 tickets for every match, distributed through national federations to fans who'd shown a track record of following their team. Fan advocacy groups in Europe welcomed the move, but called it an appeasement tactic, pointing out there was still no clear accommodation for disabled fans or companion tickets. It was a start, not a fix. Now, this is where things change. As the tournament moved from the group stage into the knockout rounds, something unexpected happened. Resale prices started crashing. Some matchups saw ticket costs drop by more than 60% in a single week. Part of that is just normal market behavior, brokers who bought in bulk trying to avoid taking a loss as the final whistle approaches. But part of it is something else, a market correction after months of inflated demand built on speculation rather than genuine fan interest. FIFA also released a wave of additional tickets through its own platform, which only added more supply into a market that was already softening. Think about it. The same dynamic pricing system that was supposed to maximize revenue may have ended up working against FIFA in the short term, scaring off enough ordinary fans early on that the secondary market is now scrambling to find buyers at any price. That's not exactly the storyline FIFA wanted heading into the business end of the tournament. But ticket prices are only half of this story. The other half is happening on your television screen, and it might be even more controversial among the people actually watching from home. This World Cup introduced something soccer has never had before, a mandatory 3-minute stoppage in both halves of every single match, no exceptions, regardless of weather, temperature, or how the game is flowing. FIFA frames it purely as player welfare, pointing to brutal heat conditions during last year's Club World Cup as the reason. And there's some real truth to that. Coaches and players genuinely struggled with extreme temperatures during that tournament's American leg. The bigger issue is what happened next. A few months after announcing the breaks, FIFA confirmed that broadcasters would be allowed to run commercials during them. That timeline raised eyebrows across the football world, because soccer is one of the only major sports that never had a built-in commercial window. No quarters, no timeouts, no 2-minute warning, just 45 uninterrupted minutes per half, which broadcasters have always found nearly impossible to monetize the way American sports do. This matters because the hydration break essentially manufactures that missing ad inventory out of thin air. Estimates suggest Fox, the English-language U.S. broadcaster, could pull in anywhere from $250 to $600 million from these breaks alone, potentially making the ad slots more valuable than what the network originally paid for the broadcast rights. If you're finding this kind of deep dive useful, this is exactly the moment to subscribe, because we're tracking every twist in this tournament's business side all the way through the final. Not every broadcaster is handling it the same way, and the contrast says a lot. Fox has leaned into hard cuts, full commercial breaks that pull viewers away from the pitch entirely, which has drawn real frustration from fans who say they're missing the restart of play. Telemundo, broadcasting in Spanish, took a different approach, keeping players visible on a split screen and having sponsors integrated more subtly rather than cutting away completely. Viewers have noticed the difference, with some fans reportedly switching broadcasts specifically because one network respects their attention more than the other. The bigger issue underneath all of this is consistency, or the lack of it. FIFA applied the breaks uniformly across every match, even in cool, rainy conditions where there's no real heat concern at all. Critics argue that undercuts the player welfare justification and makes the commercial motive a lot harder to ignore. Some coaches have even admitted, almost cheerfully, that the stoppage gave them a convenient tactical timeout they wouldn't have had otherwise, which is its own strange wrinkle nobody fully anticipated.
Now, let's talk about who actually feels all of this on the ground. Because behind every revenue chart and every quarterly earnings projection, there are real fans trying to experience this tournament. For supporters who followed their national teams to every World Cup since the 90s, the ticket pricing model has been genuinely painful. Longtime fans who travel to Brazil, Russia, and Qatar for previous tournaments describe a level of sticker shock they've never encountered before, sometimes paying 3 or 4 times what they expected for ordinary seats and far more from marquee knockout matches. For some, this is the first World Cup in their lives they simply couldn't afford to attend in person. On the flip side, the recent price crashes during the knockout rounds mean some fans are now getting incredible last-minute deals on matches that were unreachable just weeks ago. It's created a strange, uneven experience where the same ticket category can swing wildly in value, depending on exactly when you bought it. Inside the stadiums, the hydration breaks have changed the rhythm of actually watching a match live, too. Supporters in the stands get a pause to refill water and catch their breath in the heat, which most agree is a genuine benefit. But the in-stadium video screens running sponsor messages during that window have struck some fans as a strange intrusion into what's supposed to be a pure football experience, especially during matches where the weather never justified a break in the first place. Would this kind of commercialization affect your excitement for watching this World Cup? That's worth sitting with for a second, because it's clearly dividing opinion among fans who love this sport. So where does this leave the tournament heading into its final stretch? FIFA has shown it's willing to adjust under pressure. The supporter entry tier proves that. It's reasonable to expect more tweaks before the final whistle blows in New Jersey, particularly around accessibility and pricing transparency, especially with regulators in New York and New Jersey still actively investigating. The bigger question is what this means for the World Cup going forward. If dynamic pricing and ad-supported breaks prove profitable enough despite the criticism, there's a real chance future tournaments lean even further into this model. If the backlash proves loud enough and ticket sales data keeps showing fans getting priced out, FIFA may have to rethink how aggressively it monetizes the sport's biggest stage. The best-case scenario here is a more balanced model, one where FIFA keeps the revenue growth that funds youth programs and football development across more than 200 member federations, while protecting affordability and access for the fans who actually show up and create the atmosphere this tournament depends on. The worst-case scenario is a World Cup that increasingly feels designed for broadcasters, sponsors, and the wealthy, with everyday supporters pushed further to the margins every 4 years. One more thing before we wrap up. Hit that subscribe button if you want to be here when we break down how this all plays out through the quarterfinals and the final, because this story is still very much developing. So here's where we land. FIFA is on track for the most lucrative World Cup in history, somewhere around $12 billion depending on which projection you trust. That windfall is coming from record broadcast deals, expanded sponsorship, and a ticketing system that sparked investigations, public backlash, and now a strange price collapse as the tournament hits its most important matches. The hydration breaks meant to protect players have doubled as the first true commercial timeout soccer has ever had, and broadcasters are handling that opportunity in very different ways.